The recording has been started.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Um, for those that are new, this is the stakeholder meeting. We hold it quarterly, and I do try to keep things under an hour. Um, and the community outreach is a requirement of EPA to have the assessment grant. So this is part of that community involvement. I try to give some information about brownfields, general information, and then also some additional resources as well as providing updates on all of our target properties. So for this month, our agenda is going to be, we're going to talk about outreach and recruiting of new properties, our priority site updates. I did get some information also from EPA on their grant funding and the most recent grant cycle that they just announced awards on in May. So I have some of that information to share. And we have a special guest this morning from the North Carolina League of Municipalities. Chris Nida is here to talk a little bit about their resources that they have available for you all. So without further ado, we will get going. So as I mentioned, community outreach is a big part of the EPA assessment process. It's a little bit different for a state because we're not in your communities all day, every day. So the way we've targeted our involvement plan is this stakeholder meeting, but also to provide just more general information to regions around the state. So we've been reaching out to the councils of government within the target areas, which I have a map of a little bit later, just to help them understand what is a brownfields, what does that mean? Obviously, we're trying to recruit eligible properties for assessment, but to do that, people really need to know that we exist, that our grant exists. So that's part of what we're doing. The first of these trainings was in Waynesville just earlier this week, and we covered the history of environmental regulations. I mean, why does brownfields really even needed? So we kind of go back to the basics, and then we talk about types of assessments, processes around federal and state brownfields, how they can work together, along with some funding opportunities. So you all have a lot of resources and a lot of contacts, and I am more than happy to do these trainings. I would love to do them statewide. I can do them in person or virtual. If you are at all interested for your region, your county, I mean, hopefully we can loop in several organizations, but I'm happy to do that. So please feel free to reach out and we can get that set up. Just a reminder of our target areas. For those who are new, in our grant application to EPA, we defined certain county regions within the state that we would prioritize. Within those regions, we did have some priority sites that were identified specifically. To write a good grant application, you really need to tell a story. It's hard to do without some target properties. So most of these were in the original grant application. The Niquosi corridor, we're still looking, is kind of a more broad area in which we're looking to assess. We're still looking for a specific site to assess in that area. But Smoot Tannery and Pembroke Oil were both in the original application. Beaufort Marine Park and the Tillman Tract were in the application as one property. So they've since been split out into two for various reasons, but we'll talk about that a little later. Leland Auto Salvage is a new site this quarter. This one was identified because the town had applied to the state program and had been, as usual, unfortunately, waiting for a while for a project manager. In mining our site for potential properties to assess, this one came up, and we were able to conduct the assessment needed for them to get their brownfields agreement. So we're very excited about adding the town of Leland to our stakeholder group. So the first of the sites to get kicked off was Smoot Tannery. We did a phase 1 for this one, which was completed right around the time of our last stakeholder meeting. Since then, we've developed a scope of work. The consultant has prepared this really cool map. That's a Sanborn. If you're not familiar with Sanborn maps, they're just super fun historical documents that tell you all kinds of things about what the property used to be. So they did this overlay and that helped us identify where to sample on the site. Um, one of the biggest thresholds for this site was getting access. In order to do the phase 1, we had to get a warrant. There was no viable property owner from whom to get an access agreement signed. So DEQ was able to get a warrant that allowed our contractor access to the property. And they did the phase 1 and identified a number of RECs from the historic tannery use, as well as some auto repair issues. Now, the entity that actually owns the property that's listed as the owner is an LLC. Unfortunately, the manager of that LLC has since passed away about 13 years ago. So we were kind of in this weird heir property issues, and we didn't know there's nobody to sign an access agreement, right? So we worked with the town, and after talking to our attorneys, we were able to figure out that if we figured out who the heirs to the manager of the LLC were, they would really be the only folks who had a claim to that property, even if they didn't want it, right? It turns out our awesome counterparts in the town of North Wilkesboro knew the heir, the son, and was able to talk with him about possibly signing an access agreement. So DEQ attorneys drafted an access agreement that looked a little different than typical because of the odd nature of it. And the town of North Wilkesboro was able to get that access agreement signed, and he was able to get his sister. Thankfully, they got along. We were really fortunate in that aspect. But the town was able to get both heirs of the LLC's manager to sign off on it. Now, neither one of them want the property, but for us to have an access agreement saved a lot of work of trying to get a warrant every day of the phase 2 work. And also, the town has a working relationship now with the heirs, and I think that's really going to help this project to move forward. So just an example of kind of the dynamic of how DEQ can help, but we still need input, and we still need those champions within the town that we're able to, go have coffee and chat with the person about what they're trying to do and what good they're trying to accomplish in the town. So we're very excited about this one. That was a big hurdle for us to cross. And the work plan is submitted for EPA review already. We are tentatively scheduled for next month, which puts us at the end of the year for an assessment report. So I'm very excited about the movement on Smoot Tannery this quarter. Pembroke Oil has had a lot of activity this last quarter as well. Their phase 2 assessment actually got conducted. Soil and groundwater sampling. The picture here is a very typical environmental monitoring well. Honestly, you'll notice these even as on gas stations that you drive up to every day, right? The little triangle on the top, the white triangle, is an indicator that that's an environmental monitoring well. So once you know what they look like, you actually might see them a little more often. But as happens in pretty much every phase 2, there's always something a little bit unexpected. In our case, it was shallow groundwater. Shallow groundwater is it's challenging when we're trying to evaluate for vapor intrusion because of the sampling method. What we were able to do, we worked with our consultant on this one and with EPA, who gave us a really very quick turnaround on modifications of our scope to do kind of 2 sets of soil gas sampling so that we can compare the data and really have better certainty with 2 types of data for that soil gas assessment. So we are excited about that. We have some of that soil gas sampling is getting finished up this week. There is they'll have to retrieve some of the samplers. We use something called a passive sampler as well, and that'll have to sit in the ground for a period of time before they're retrieved. But similarly, we are expecting to have an assessment report before the end of the year on this one. So we're very excited about the movement on Pembroke Oil as well. So this was another great example of access and the town having a great relationship with the property owner. So there is a property owner that exists for this one, but the town very quickly was able to get an access agreement because they've worked with him for so long. So we really appreciate that. Beaufort Marine Park. I talked about this site being split into 2 properties. So this one was also in the Brownfields program, in the state program. Over the course of the years, the town of Bellhaven had acquired a portion of the property, and Beaufort County had maintained ownership of another larger parcel. So in order to kind of keep the two sites separate, so each entity could do what their brownfields agreement they needed to do on their own properties, and not have one have to sign off on the other's brownfields agreement in the final round, we ended up splitting them into two projects. So Beaufort Marine Park is we talked about last time, they're going to do a boat ramp. They have a grant from the Fish and Wildlife Service to do that boat ramp. Now that work is actually scheduled at the end of the year. So what we did was phase our assessment approach in order to accommodate that construction schedule. We wanted to make sure that we were able to collect the samples needed before the construction workers were out there moving dirt around. So the first phase of our phase 2 assessment was conducted. And there's some pictures of our consultant and their drilling contractor out there getting the soil samples, field screening the soil samples. We should have a report on that. I believe they have draft data, and so we should see a report on that in short order. The second phase of that assessment, we have a scope of work on, and we're working on the work plan for submittal to EPA. And then Tillman Tract is the second property that got split out of this one. We are still working on a scope of work for that property as well. So I anticipate we'll have work plans submitted to EPA for both of these by no later than the end of the year. So these are still definitely moving forward. So transitioning away from some of our site updates, this is some of the information I got from EPA on their budget and their grant cycle this past year. I do wish we could just pick an acronym, so I'm going to call it bill funding. So the EPA has kind of two pots of money, the CERCLA 104K and the CERCLA 128A. The CERCLA 128A is funding that goes to states to help run their brownfields programs. So the grant funding that we see, the assessment, the cleanup grants, things like that, comes out of the CERCLA 104K pot. And so just calling your attention to that $330 million, that's a big jump from what they traditionally have. So EPA has a lot of money going forward. Within that $300 million, there's a lot of different things that EPA is doing. One of those is the targeted brownfields assessment. Targeted brownfields assessments they have a large pot of money right now. $600,000 a year is their typical per year, and now they have $4 million until they spend it. So if you have coworkers or colleagues that are not necessarily within our grant area and we're not able to help them, the targeted brownfield assessment might be a good resource for them right now. So if you have more questions about that, certainly let me know. But that is something that would be helpful. I have a little bit of more information on the next slide on those too. And this technical assistance for brownfields, if you all remember last quarter, we had ICMA come and talk about what their opportunities are. Additional funding went to ICMA. The new contract for the technical assistance for brownfields is going to be NJIT. I don't know when that changeover date is. So currently, if we need some work done through ICMA, they are still the current tab provider, but know that in the next it'll be fairly soon, I think. NJIT will be taking over that ICMA. And so that technical assistance is like, you can do market studies and planning and things like that related to brownfields. For when I send the slides out, I wanted you to have this application link here for the targeted brownfields assessments. The targeted brownfield assessment program provides essentially what we can do, a phase 1 and phase 2, but they look at the eligibility on a site by site basis. They don't have a target region within which they're working like we do. Obviously the applicant and the site must be eligible. So if the city would happen to be the responsible party for a site in your community, they wouldn't be able to fund that assessment. But if it's something that the city is looking to acquire, if they're just not sure and they need a phase one and they're outside of our region, that this is a great resource right now. David Hayes is the EPA coordinator for this, and there's an application and his contact information on this slide. But I'm happy to help start that conversation with EPA as well if there's something that comes up. Most of you right now on this call are within our region. So if you have something you need an assessment on that you haven't thought of already, please reach out to me first, because it's something that we might be able to help with. The EPA summarized the MARC grant competition from this past year. One of the notable things here is the community-wide assessment grants. As typical, these are very competitive, right? We're only seeing 40 and 30% in our region get awarded. But looking at some of the other categories, we saw some interesting things. The assessment coalitions, which is 3 or more members, were highly funded, and they had a higher dollar amount. So there's also a multi-purpose grant that will do assessment and cleanup. And then notice the cleanup funds down at the bottom. Most of the cleanup grants that were applied for got awarded. So that's something to think going forward. I believe that EPA anticipates that funding of cleanup grants is going to continue to be successful. It's going to continue to be somewhere where they are wanting to put their money. And so that, as I was thinking about this next grant cycle, how can we, as the state with an assessment grant, kind of facilitate you all to get in a position where you could apply for your own cleanup grant and be successful there, instead of trying to start with one of these assessment grants. Similarly, the TBA, the targeted brownfield assessment, could be a way to get you ready for this cleanup grant. So for those who have regional commissions on the phone that may have some overlap with us, but may also have some other counties that aren't covered in our region, this assessment coalition might be a great idea. Having one of the challenges I think EPA was seeing is staffing, right? With such a large number of grants, they are considering one of the opportunities might be to award higher dollar grants. So it's the same number of grants to manage for them with the staff that they have, but a higher dollar amount for the grantee. So something to think about as we're kind of moving forward in this year. With that said, there's probably going to be some, we always have to go through a procurement process. I just wanted to provide this as a general reference for all of the municipalities on the phone. Please don't accept free work if offered. I think it's really important that you understand the EPA does have a process on which they want us as grantees to procure a contractor. And so it's really easy to kind of miss some things sometimes. So I wanted you to have this EPA guidance document on procuring a contractor, accepting guidance documents and things like that. Example RFPs and queues as they have here. That's generally not looked highly upon by EPA if you are a grantee. One thing to consider if you do want a consultant, I know we all are having staffing issues, right? These EPA grants are time consuming and technical to apply for. If you want to have a consultant help you with that, consider doing your procurement up front, and then having that procurement process in place, procuring your contractor to write the grant application, and then to conduct the work on the back end if you're awarded. So that's a way to kind of help yourself build resources internally, but still meeting those EPA procurement requirements. So that's just a heads up. Please keep it in mind as you go forward. So you're also more than welcome to ask me. All of our documents are on Laserfiche. I have lots of things that you're able to reference, and I'm happy to be a resource for you. So, um, all right. I'm gonna stop there. Before I introduce Chris, I wanted to see if there's any questions. Nobody's mute. I mean, you're welcome to come off mute. You're welcome to type in the chat, whatever. Any questions about funding, progress, um, anything in general. And we'll stop again after Chris does. So if you have some questions come up, please feel free to just pop them in the chat and I'll review them as well. So without further ado, Chris Nida serves as the Director of Technical Assistance for Cities at the North Carolina League of Municipalities. In that role, he oversees the League's research and technical assistance efforts, including the resources available to cities and towns to assist in spending their American Rescue Plan funds. In addition to the ARP services, Chris leads a team of employees working in the field throughout the state and consulting with League member municipalities on issues such as finance, budgeting, human resources, and more. Chris received his undergraduate degree from Ohio Wesleyan University and his master's degree in public policy from Duke. So I am really excited that he's here to tell you all about his resources. So Chris, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you see and hear me okay?
We can, and I've stopped sharing. So if you have anything you want to present, you're more than welcome to.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation, the opportunity to be here today. I see some familiar names and faces, so good morning, but thank you for the introduction. Um, Before I get into kind of our services, I do, some of you may know this and may be aware of that. Now, oh, there's the share button. I apologize. I am let me see here. Are you seeing that? What is the league slide now?
Yes,
I'm hoping that's,
we've got it.
yeah, I'm hoping that many of you know this, but just by way of brief introduction to the North Carolina League of Municipalities, we are the membership association for all cities and towns in the state. We have 551 municipalities, incorporated municipalities in North Carolina. We hover somewhere around, 540 plus members. So almost universal. There's no requirement that municipalities belong to the league, but we're very grateful for those that do and take it seriously. That we are your advocate, and we try to be kind of the one-stop shop for cities and towns, led by cities and towns, and serve as the unified voice of the state's municipalities. You may be seeing my notes slides. I can't tell which screen I'm actually sharing, but what I really just wanted to share as much as anything, and again, I hope many of you know this, is that we have a full range of services that are available to our member municipalities. So I'll talk some about what we do in the technical assistance for cities department, but I think some of you municipalities, many of our municipalities are members of our insurance pools. We operate 3 insurance pools, health insurance pool, a property and liability pool, and workers' compensation as well. And so we have a whole arm of the organization that is devoted to serving you on the insurance side. And there's risk control services, there's training services there, claims adjusters. A number of my colleagues work in the claim department. So we are a full service insurance operation in addition to everything else that we do at the league. I have been, in my time here at the league, served on our government affairs team for a time. So, advocacy and lobbying is certainly a huge part of what we do, particularly at this time of year when the General Assembly is in session and debating a budget. And, we track somewhere, it can be 400, 500 bills every year just because there are so many issues that touch municipalities and what our members do. And then we have a number of training and professional development opportunities. Some of you may have been to our annual City Vision Conference, which happens in April, but we do other trainings around the state. I mentioned, kind of the risk control side, police driver training, training for elected officials, just a wide range of offerings there as well. And then technical assistance for cities kind of branches through all of this, but part of what we do is research and information. We have surveys out there. We do salary surveys. So if you need a new finance officer or clerk or whatever the position might be, and you're curious what other cities of your size or cities in your geography are paying, we have kind of clearinghouse information like that, do surveys on fringe benefits, budgets, all those sorts of things. So again, I won't belabor that, but just to let you know that if you ever have any questions about what the league does, or you have some kind of question about what's happening in your municipalities, feel free to reach out to me anytime. Um, and if I'm not the right person to answer the question, I will certainly connect you with somebody here, because we try to be that resource for whatever it is that our members need or have questions on. So I will stop sharing there. And again, I think part of why I'm here today is to talk about the services we have available through the American Rescue Plan. And I know that, it almost sounds, um, not that the American Rescue Plan is getting old, it's a little over 2+ years old, but I know that you have heard an awful lot about it over the past 2+ years. Your local fiscal recovery funds, your reporting that you have to do to the Treasury every April. Some of you may know that we were fortunate to receive from the state of North Carolina grants of their state fiscal recovery funds to provide technical assistance to our members with the American Rescue Plan. And so we have staff that are available to consult on issues related to the American Rescue Plan, how you're spending the money, compliance activities. Um, some of our municipalities, I say this all the time, I mentioned 551 incorporated municipalities in North Carolina. I think we talk about the big cities and the growing areas a lot. Um, More than 400 of our municipalities have less than 5,000 people, and over 200 of them have under a population of under 1,000. So we really are still a state full of small cities and towns. And a lot of what we're doing at the league, and specifically in the ARP technical assistance area, is to provide capacity to those small towns, because we know there are employees that wear multiple hats and are elected officials that are, serving as department heads in our smallest towns. And so we want to bring expertise and capacity to our small towns, so that as you're dealing with these new programs and new sources of funding like the American Rescue Plan and some of these other federal bills that are coming down, you have the resources that you need and can get the questions answered that you need in order to do that right in your municipality. But I think one of the things that I wanted to highlight about our American Rescue Plan Technical Assistance Program is that, in addition to staff that are available to come out and meet with our municipalities, as the American Rescue Plan is involved and as the federal funding situation has evolved, a need that we continue to hear, and I think it, just builds on the presentation from earlier today, is that there are all these grant opportunities coming down from the federal government and the state government. There are more dollars coming, and a lot of our municipalities are interested in accessing them and have needs that could be served by these grants, but just don't have the capacity or the expertise, or have not worked with grants before. And so we are working with a firm to kind of have a third party, contracted expertise, a firm that has experience writing federal grants, identifying federal grants, and using our state fiscal recovery funds we were granted to connect our members, municipalities that have grant needs, with a firm that has expertise in the grant writing area, to provide some free grant writing and grant identification assistance to our members. And so, these are all American Rescue Plan funds. They're state fiscal recovery funds that came through the American Rescue Plan. And so we are trying to do that grant writing kind of in conjunction with American Rescue Plan projects, American Rescue Plan funded projects. But, that can take a lot of different forms. It may be that you're using your local allocation for a project that needs some additional grant funding. It may be that you have a state grant of ARP funds that, again, could benefit in some way from additional grant funding. If you freed up funds in your budget by using your ARP funds to pay salaries or pay some other expenses, and you freed up money that you'd like to combine with a grant to achieve something in your local community, we're happy to talk through how we can sort of establish that tie to the ARP. And so I think, part of what I just wanted to share this morning was that if you're a municipality, if you're a league member, and you are interested in, learning more about the grants that are coming down and could benefit from maybe some grant consultation or some grant writing. I know there are a lot of, other organizations. There are COGS, there are nonprofits, there are lots of people out there in the grant world. Just know that the league can be a resource to you as well. And I think there's lots of needs to go around. So we are certainly not trying to compete with any organization. We just want to make sure that all of our members have the resources they need. And so that if you have grant questions, as more of these grants come available and you're trying to tie it back to needs and projects that you've funded with the American Rescue Plan or that have a tie to the American Rescue Plan, we'd love to talk to you about how to help, how we can make that happen, how we can connect you to our experts and see if we can, I don't think anything is ever promised in the competitive grant world, but we would love to, give you some free assistance in terms of putting together a competitive application, identifying which grants are right for you, and just talking through the whole grant landscape. Because, as was mentioned, if we settled on bipartisan infrastructure law, and we'll use the bill acronym today, I think that bill alone is going to bring at least $11 billion directly to North Carolina. And I think something like 9 billion of that is going to transportation, but there will be other funding available at the state level. There are competitive grants at the federal level. And then, I've heard a lot of talk about kind of the big three of federal bills, coming behind the bipartisan infrastructure law is the CHIPS Act, which has some kind of chip manufacturing incentives. And then there's the Inflation Reduction Act, which may bring some kind of climate investments and energy efficiency investment grant opportunities down the line as well. So there's going to be more money rolling out. So, we want North Carolina to be competitive. We want our municipalities to be competitive accessing all of these. So if we can help with that, or you'd just like to talk more about what services we're offering, I think my contact information was in the slides. I can put it in the chat here as well, but we're just happy to talk through certainly that piece of it. But again, as I mentioned, any other questions that you have as a municipality, whether it's ARP or beyond, again, just always feel free to give me a call or send me an email, and we are happy to try to help any way we can. So I think I've talked a lot about the ARP over the past 2 years. I could probably ramble on more today, but in the interest of time, I'll stop there, and I'm happy to take any questions. But again, feel free to reach out to me offline as well. And I just appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for the invitation to be here today.
I don't see any questions in the chat, but does anybody have any questions for Chris? I have a question while they're thinking. So if the municipality does have a project that's kind of in the back of their head, we would love to do this. Like, how do they, at what level of a project does it have to be at in order to bring it to you? Can it be a conceptual idea? Can it be or does it have to have like this is what we're doing defined? What level of project can it be?
No, I think that's a great question. And I think that's exactly what we're hearing, is that a lot of our municipalities might have, early ideas or be very early in the process, say, hey, we think we need this, but we don't exactly know how to craft it or what to ask for. I think we are happy to help at any phase of the process, whether it's, project conception or, kind of putting meat on the bone, for lack of a better term, and in terms of getting those details you need for a grant application, or if you have something that's already been proposed and you just want to repackage it for another grant application, we can do that as well. I think whatever phase you're in, even if it's really early on, we'd love to just help craft the project, put together the application, figure out what the right kind of source of funding might be. Wherever you're at, let us know, and we will try to help.
And you all, once you have the project, once they send you the project, you can kind of target which grants to go after to get that. Okay.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Okay. And likewise, if you have a project that comes to you and has an environmental component, call me, right? Like this.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're here for here for as well, is to kind of get those projects to a threshold point where they can get additional funding, like EPA cleanup funding or otherwise. So if anybody on the phone has demolition money ideas. we're
Yeah.
always on the lookout for demolition money.
I know some, there are those projects that are just, it's hard. There's a need out there and it's hard to find a real targeted source of grant funding. But yeah, I know, the state is putting more and more resources behind this because we want North Carolina to be as competitive as possible with all these projects and these fundings coming down. And so we appreciate your partnership and everything the state is doing. And we're just here to try to, be one more source of that, hopefully kind of boots on the ground and connection with what's happening locally.
All right. All right, folks. Any last minute and any last questions? Jordan, you can probably stop the recording. And with that, we'll just wrap up a little bit early and let everybody go home a little early on Friday. So thank you all for coming. And of course, reach out to